Good evening and welcome to I'm Listening, Stay Connected. I'm Listening is a 24/7, 365 initiative that works to destigmatize talking about mental health. Tonight we're going to be talking with Dr. Jen Wider and Laura Rhodes-Levin about anxiety and some updates on COVID-19. If you want to join the conversation, you can do so by tweeting at hashtag I'm Listening, and we'll be answering your tweets throughout the show. I wanted to start tonight off by talking about depression. Now, a lot of individuals are assuming that depression is not something they're going to encounter because they might not have a history of that mental health struggle or issue. And I'm giving people the heads up that it's something we want to work daily on so as to prevent having to encounter a heavier level of depression than's necessary. Often, mental health is something that can creep up on us, and we wait until we start to develop the symptoms to really seek out the ways to eliminate or alleviate that. But knowing that depression is something that we might all encounter to some extent during self-isolation, social distancing, and all the anxiety that just centers itself around what's going on in the news and in our culture, there are ways to make sure that we can kind of decrease some of the levels and maybe even possibly not have to encounter the depression. So again, we talk a lot on this show about self-care. Now, remember, self-care isn't something that you do every now and then. Self-care is something that's ongoing. Self-care is always about frequency. So just like taking a medication, it's something that you have to constantly be focused on and taking in order to really build up the powerful levels of immunity that self-care can provide. So what are the things we need to do so as to prevent ourselves possibly from encountering heavy levels of depression? Well, the first piece, again, is socialization. Now, I was talking on my social media about this because individuals are still not understanding the importance of social distance. Now, some of us live with other individuals in our home that are going out into the world for their weekly or every other week grocery store shopping. Some people have essential jobs, and so they're still going out into the workplace. Make sure that you are having important conversations with them about the precautions they are taking, because anytime an individual leaves our home and re-enters, they're possibly setting up everyone that lives in that dwelling for contracting COVID-19. So I want everyone to talk to their roommates, their loved ones, and have that conversation and say, what are the boundaries and precautions that you are taking? What are the things that you're being thoughtful about so as to protect yourself, but also to protect us? Because again, this is passed along amongst surfaces, and it can live for hours and days depending on what packages or the surfaces are, whether it's metal or paper or wood. So again, have those important conversations with everyone living in the home. People are being a little too confident in cohabitating. Now, for those that live alone, it's really important that you pay attention to the levels of contact that you're making with others. Isolation, complete isolation, is one of the most toxic things that a human being can encounter. We as humans are social beings. We are born out of relationship. We're always in relationship. Our immunity, our brain, it's a social organ. So again, FaceTime and Skyping will allow for us to hear vocal tone. It'll allow for us to make some eye contact. But I do want to talk about the fact that to meet someone outside, maintaining 6 feet of distance is going to be the safest way that you can encounter another human being. I'm still hearing about people throwing dinner parties, game nights, having friends over. That is not following the necessary social distancing. So if you're going to encounter another human being, do it please outside of the home where no contact is made, maintain the 6 feet of space, and that will give you the neurobio vitamin that human socialization provides for us. So know that that's imperative. So again, for those that live alone, make sure you are paying attention and checking in on the levels of time you're spending with other people. You want to do it multiple times throughout the day because that's going to be one of the things that are going to help prevent the depression from creeping up. Also, finding purpose and meaning throughout your day. We cannot just wake up and experience nothing but time creep all day long where we don't know what time it is, we don't know what we're doing, we don't have anything planned. That absolutely will lead to restlessness, it'll lead to insomnia, and will also help feed the possibility of encountering depression. So again, it's about that level of connection. It's about having purpose and meaning throughout your day, having some structure. And again, I can't impress upon you enough the importance of opening the windows and getting sunlight. Look, we're all in this together and we're all managing this, but you have to have those difficult conversations with yourself and with those others in your life about the precautions they're taking, the boundaries they're setting, and not supporting going to those events and parties that we're still hearing about on the news. Breaks my heart. But now we're going to be talking with Dr. Jen Wider, our medical health expert. Dr. Jen, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
So I'm watching the news. It's constantly shifting and changing. The advice that they're giving is not always consistent. Let's jump in by just first talking about the contagiousness after the resolution of symptoms, because I saw a study talking about that.
Right. Chris, I think one of the more confusing things about this entire issue for people is that the information that we're receiving isn't always consistent, as you mentioned, and that can be very confusing and unnerving for people. The study that you're referencing was a study of 16 patients, and that was in a respiratory journal. It was featured today in the New York Post. What I want to caution people to remember is that in medicine, when you look at a study, they oftentimes will tell you that there are these little studies, Chris, with small cohorts of people. 16 people would absolutely configure a small cohort. So when you look at a study like this, you have to realize that it's definitely not going to tell the tale of every other patient. The issue with COVID-19 is that we don't have a tremendous amount of data readily available with tons and tons of people right now. It was a new virus 8 weeks ago. We saw it for the first time in Wuhan, China, and now researchers are trying to look at these statistics and the data. So this article that was featured in the New York Post that spoke a little bit about contagiousness after the disease said that people can be contagious up to several weeks after they recover. That is definitely a study that was consistent among the 16 patients that they looked at. But again, when you're looking at research studies in medicine, you want to take a step back and try to look at a pattern, almost a patchwork quilt. And because we don't have other studies like that, it would probably be wise for healthcare providers that are treating patients on the front lines to err on the side of caution and to assume that if somebody is now, over the disease and has had it, that they need to look at them clinically, but also, if possible, to test them. And that's what they were doing in other countries, Chris. They were testing people twice. They needed 2 negative studies in order to be released out into the population. We don't have that luxury yet in the United States because the testing is still not readily available to everybody. So I think if you recover from this disease, I think most doctors will say that 14 days after you were diagnosed as a positive is okay. But other doctors may not agree. And I think it's important to err on the safe side and to absolutely speak to your healthcare provider, because everybody's opinion may be a little different. But we should probably be conservative as a society right now and not rush back into trying to be with other people.
Okay.
Or our family members. Yeah.
And to go with this whole err on the side of caution, because again, that's what I'm trying to advise everyone as well, is again, flatten the curve. We're trying to protect people. Let's talk about face masks. Now, the reason why this was interesting to me is when I venture out as rarely as possible to go get groceries, a lot of us will see multiple individuals wearing face masks. Now, I was following the advice of, leave those for the individuals that are sick and the doctors. Where are we now with that?
Well, here's another thing that's very confusing. We originally heard that everybody should wear a face mask. Then we were told, because there was this huge lack of face masks and protective equipment for healthcare providers, that no, we should no longer be using a face mask. Here's the situation. There are different types of face masks, right? And I'm sure many people have heard this before. The N95 face mask, or the respirator face mask, which really represents that pore size in the mask. It's that tiny little hole that allows in certain viral particles. N95 is a very safe mask. It should be reserved for our first line healthcare providers. As of right now, Chris, it is heartbreaking looking at messaging boards that I'm on. I have a family member who works in an emergency department. There's not enough protective equipment. Our front lines are reusing equipment when they shouldn't. Even Duke Medical just came out with a study on how to bake your mask in a stove or oven so that you can sterilize it, because unfortunately, a lot of people have hoarded these masks, right? So what many doctors will tell you is that, and there was a wonderful video recently put out by an emergency room physician, for us, the people that aren't fighting on the front lines, it is not unwise not to wear a protective mask when you go out shopping, okay? That's not a bad idea. The issue is you do not need an N95 mask. One of the doctors that put out this great video, and I'll share it with you, Chris, talks about just covering your face with protection, whether it's a surgical mask that you might have had in your house, like for a Halloween costume, whether it's a bandana or a cloth mask, just so you remember not to touch your face with your hands. Because what's so interesting with this is that we touch our faces so often and don't realize it. During this crisis, we all realize how often we touch our faces. So when you're out grocery shopping and you're touching stuff, or perhaps you're touching your credit card and then you're signing something on a keypad, you will know that if you do touch your face, you will be protected. But when it comes to N95, they are not recommending it for the general population. In fact, if you have those at home, it would be amazing to donate them to a local hospital, especially if they're a sealed package. Because one of the worst things that have come out of this, from my standpoint, is how ill prepared we are to protect our first care responders, from EMTs to nurses to doctors in the ICUs and the emergency departments that are putting their lives on the line to keep us safe.
Okay.
So,
Beautifully said. So let me ask you this, because this is the other thing that I'm noticing a lot of is we're moving into allergy season.
yes.
Now, I have horrible allergies.
Me too.
Okay. And so what also we bump into is the fact that, again, a lot of the symptoms of COVID-19 are constantly being changed as well. At one point, we learned it was also had some digestive issues related to it. At first, we thought it was just deeper respiratory. So how would one, such as myself, how would we distinguish the difference between allergy symptoms and true COVID-19 symptoms?
So this is another great point, right? You're absolutely right. We've seen changing symptoms like throughout this entire thing. As you mentioned, there was GI distress, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting was mentioned as potentially an early symptom. A lot of people have lack of smell or lack of taste as an early symptom. When you look at allergy versus like COVID-19, sometimes we'll see these outlier cases, Chris, where people will present very differently than the mass group of people that have this. But again, we have to go with statistical analysis, which shows us the most common signs of someone who is coronavirus 19 positive is a cough, it's a fever, it's a dry cough, it's a fever, and it can be shortness of breath, right? So those are the more common symptoms when it comes to COVID-19. With allergy, it's a little bit different. It's a scratchy sore throat versus a sore throat that sometimes you'll get with COVID-19. So it's hard to sort of tell the difference. Sometimes if you're an allergy sufferer and it's a seasonal allergy, you will remember what it feels like to have a scratchy throat, because it usually comes along with a prodrome of other allergic symptoms like itchy eyes, watery eyes, your ears feel itchy, you're congested, you have a little bit of a postnasal drip. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to so nervous that they have these COVID-19 symptoms when it really seems like it's allergy. If it comes along and you're not getting better, if it doesn't resolve with an antihistamine or a medication you might take for seasonal allergies, if you then spike a fever, you're feeling completely fatigued and you get a dry cough, you may want to ask your healthcare provider if you're eligible for a test. But for the most part, you and I alike are like so many people suffering from allergies, wondering and worrying, are we corona positive?
Beautiful. So, and we have some tweets I'd love for you to answer with us. Sure. Tonight we're talking with Dr. Jen Wider, and we're talking about updated information around COVID-19 because it is rapidly changing. And, again, I'm listening, Stay Connected is about helping us get more comfortable talking about mental health and kind of decreasing some of the anxiety. So if you want to join the conversation, you can do so by tweeting at #I'mListening. And this tweet asks, so we are being told not to get tested if we aren't really sick. But also if we wait too long to get tested or to get help, then it's too late and we could die, ?
All right, this is an example of someone who's very frightened, listening to all of the information that's pouring in. One of the things that I want to remind people, like I said about the article recently in the New York Post, about that very small study, is what you said once before last week when I was on about taking time to distance yourself from the media is so important, because remember, a lot of the cases that are being featured that we're seeing on television or in these newspapers are sort of these outlier cases in a sense. You need to ground yourself with the statistics. The vast majority of people that contract COVID-19 are going to recover. Many of them will have asymptomatic to mild disease. A small number, much smaller than the vast majority, will have moderate disease and may need hospitalization. And a very small number of the people hospitalized will have severe disease. And so if you get a test, and if you're not eligible for a test or your healthcare provider doesn't feel like you qualify for a test, then you should trust in their idea and their feeling that you don't qualify for a test, and you should take comfort in that, because they're not going to leave you decompensating at home. If somebody feels very sick, it's very important to describe your symptoms specifically to your healthcare provider. Do not mince words, essentially. I have a friend whose mother had a situation. She was in her 70s, Chris, and she spoke to a doctor on the phone, and he asked if she was short of breath, and she answered no, which she clearly was. And they ended up not testing her immediately, and then they tested her again when she became short of breath. So be very honest and open about your symptoms. Testing is going to become much more available. It has been over this week. Next week, we're going to see even more tests that we can even do at home, rapid tests that you don't have to wait several days for a result. So we'll have more of a chance to have a test and to feel comfortable whether you're exposed or not. But even the person asking this question, even if they were COVID-19 positive, most likely they would be told to isolate at home and then to watch their symptoms carefully. And if they're comfortable enough and not gasping for breath with shortness of breath and some other symptoms where they're spiking a fever and feel toxic, they would probably be monitored at home. But the chances of them dying are incredibly low. And I know it's an incredibly anxiety-provoking time for people. I totally get it. But follow the news from channels that you trust. Listen to Dr. Chris.
Yes.
Listen to this broadcast. Go on to the CDC seriously. Go on to the World Health Organization. Get your news from public figures like Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who was the former FDA chair, people that really know what they're talking about. This is not a death sentence for the vast majority of people who get this. Most people are going to recover. And at the end of this, most of us will be exposed, and those who aren't exposed will be vaccinated against it when this whole episode comes to a close.
And thank you for bringing up that other side point, because I think that's imperative. Be very thoughtful about who you're listening to, because there's a lot of people in the political world that are using scare tactics. They're minimizing what's happening. And so thank you for pointing that out. CDC, experts, scientists. We have one final tweet, Dr. Jen. This one says, I wash my hands and avoid people, but is there anything else I need to be doing to protect myself? Are gloves and masks necessary? We talked a little bit about that, but weigh in on the masks and gloves, especially the gloves.
Yeah, listen, if you're at home with your family or alone or sheltering with one other person and you don't contact anybody else, then the chances of you having to wear gloves or a mask in your house is very low. If you venture out, and like you said, Chris, when you go out, when that person's going out to get groceries, there's a chance that they're introducing the virus into your house, right? It's not that high. It's lower than somebody who's working in the front lines and then comes home to their family. But when you go out and grocery shop, absolutely. I, like many medical experts, will tell you to put gloves on while you're shopping. The mask, another example, you don't need an N95 mask to go shopping. In fact, if you put an N95 mask to go shopping and you put it on correctly, it's very difficult to breathe. It's not the easiest mask to breathe in, and shopping becomes a bit of a challenge. So you can wear a mask. It will stop you from touching your face and potentially transmitting the virus to your face. But overall, you don't need to walk around in a glove and mask. If you're taking a walk outside, like you said, when the weather is good, you do not need to wear a mask unless you're shoulder to shoulder with people that you're worried are coughing on you. But if you're social distancing, like Dr. Chris said, with the 6 feet in between different people, you're safe without a mask outside. Now, Chris, that has a caveat. If you have an elderly person in your home, if somebody is immunosuppressed, there's no reason not to take extra precautions. So I saw people last weekend who are elderly that were out walking with a mask. That's fine. Listen to your healthcare provider. You can certainly ask questions. Dr. Chris and I don't know everybody's individual history, so it's important to check in with your healthcare provider. But for the most part, if you're healthy, you can walk outside without a mask. You don't have to be in your home with a mask. But I would recommend grocery shopping, covering your face if it makes you more comfortable, but absolutely wearing gloves.
Beautiful. Dr. Jen, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Dr. Chris.
Have a beautiful, beautiful night. All right. So again, if you want to join the conversation, you can do so by tweeting at #I'mListening. We're here to answer all your thoughts and questions. We want to get mental health something that we're very comfortable talking about. That's the way we're really going to help inoculate ourselves and other people against encountering really problematic mental health issues around this. But more importantly, we also want you to know that we're here. This tweet asks, I've been going on bike rides with a friend, and I posted videos of it on my story, but a lot of people are hating on me for it. Biking is still social distancing, right? Just been really lonely, and biking with her helps. Listen, I love this question, and we are seeing a lot of individuals posting pictures of them socializing. Some of them are absolutely not being smart about it. They're not being fair about it, and they're not following the social distancing rules. And then there are other individuals who are. Now, listen, if you do live alone, I think it's imperative when we talk about mental health, which if we're talking about total health, mental health has to be a part of that conversation. Now, if you are someone who is completely isolated, I do advise exiting your home and going for walks. I do want you getting fresh air and sunlight, but again, while doing so with a distance from others. So if you are not touching each other's bikes, if you are not going over into each other's homes, if you are maintaining a distance, I'm comfortable with you being outside, making eye contact, and having a conversation with another person. That's imperative. So what I would say is when you're posting those videos or pictures on social media, you can mention that you are following the social distancing protocol, maintaining 6 feet apart and just keeping it outdoors. And that's a way to also just kind of pass a little education education along and support others that are feeling really lonely, because that's one of the things that I'm hearing a lot about from the patients I'm still working with via teletherapy, is that they're lonely. They feel alone in this. They miss connecting with others. So again, that's important. So just really, really focus on this. All right, now we're going to be talking with Laura Rhodes-Levin, licensed therapist from the Missing Piece Center for Anxiety. Laura, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into anxiety. Right now, I think more than ever, all of us are swimming in some level of anxiety. So when you're asked, just in a general sense, how to help manage that, what are the tips that you give?
Well, just first of all, remembering that it's a fight or flight response. So we're getting a lot of signals from the outside world right now that we should be in a fight or flight state of being. So it's about, for me, being more careful than fearful. We can be full of care, but not full of fear, which I really appreciated about what you were saying earlier. Go out, ride a bike with your friend, keep the social distance, but still don't be afraid to give yourself what you need to be happy and healthy.
I think that's an important distinction too, right? Is we still have basic needs that have to get met. And so we want to be caring for ourselves and other people, but also not keeping ourselves in a constant state of panic. And I think, would you agree that a lot of what drives that is the conversations we're allowing ourselves to be immersed in, and then the news?
Oh, yeah.
So it's a lot about managing that. I mean, I know personally in my own life, after doing therapy with clients and helping individuals through the anxiety, I have to go home and kind of settle myself and take a little bit of break from that. So are you talking to people about boundaries with social media?
Yeah, it's hard because people are so used to social media in general. And I find that social media creates a lot of fear in just a regular everyday life of keeping up with the Joneses. But now we've transferred from a very heated political environment to now a very emotional health environment. So I say get your little bit of news and then go on with your day. The news is important. You want to stay informed. But it's just like broccoli. You have to eat broccoli, but you want to eat more than broccoli.
That's right. I like food references. It's kind of like I'm watching the news and then I'm going on and my feed is only like cat videos.
Right.
So talk to us about anxiety attacks, because I think individuals are encountering different and new levels of anxiety that they haven't before. So I hear people using that word very loosely. So what would someone want to look for to know whether or not they're having a true anxiety attack?
Okay, well, the first thing to know is no matter what your symptoms are, understand you are going to be okay. The worst thing that happens in an anxiety attack, which is really actually a panic attack, is that you may faint and your body just resets itself. So that is the absolute worst thing that is going to happen. So if you feel yourself starting to get lightheaded, sit down, get someplace where that's comfortable. But an anxiety attack is really a dump of cortisol. It's a dump of fight or flight awareness. So you're going to find your heart racing a little bit, your palms will sweat, maybe your tummy starts to get a little bit nervous. It's almost like going up a roller coaster if you don't like roller coasters, if that makes sense.
I don't like roller coasters. But I like what you said is it's not going to kill you. It's not life-threatening. It's going to feel uncomfortable. Sit down and kind of settle yourself.
Yeah, I love to tell my clients it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, and that's scary for us because, again, I'm watching people encounter these new mental health struggles that they're not familiar with. And so I say to people, just because you might not have a history of anxiety, this might be the first time that it's something you start to encounter.
Yeah, and we all have a history of anxiety. It just gets built up in our limbic system until it's a little bit too much, and then things feel overwhelming. But we've all had anxiety at different times in our lives. And it's just our body's way of saying, please get into the body instead of into the mind. I think we like to think our way out of anxiety. And the part that thinks is the frontal cortex, and that's just an egomaniac. You want to be in the room you're in. That's where you know you're safe. You want to put on soothing music. You want to smell something that's good. You want to be in something comfortable, sitting on something comfortable. I don't know if I said listening to something comfortable already, but coming into your body and staying away from the part of your brain that's not in the room with you and telling you to worry about all these things that are nowhere near you, most likely.
We have some tweets. I'd love you to answer them with us. And if you want to join the
Okay.
conversation, you can do so by tweeting at hashtag I'm listening. This tweet asks, my roommate has a lot of anxiety about everything going on, and I'm not sure how to help her. We aren't really close, so I don't want to overstep boundaries, but I know she needs support. So for those that are at home with loved ones, family members, roommates that are, the other is the anxious one, how could they help ground them, do you think?
It's hard to control how other people are reacting and how they're experiencing them on experiencing anything. First thing is you can let them know, hey, I'm there. I know we don't connect that often, but I'm here if you need to talk. Another way of creating an atmosphere of comfort is being okay yourself, sort of creating an atmosphere in the room that we're okay. We're in our lovely little apartment. We're listening to music. We're watching TV. Or I'm in the background singing and relaxing. The whole world isn't falling apart. Inside our living room, I'm okay. So they may pick up on the idea that they could be okay too.
Ah, yes, the beauty of co-regulation, right? Stay calm so they can stay calm. And we have one final tweet related to anxiety. This tweet asks, how do I handle stressing out about living with someone who still goes to work and comes in contact with a lot of people daily? I think that's important. There's a lot of people that are still having to leave the home for work, and their partners that are at home receiving them are wondering what they're bringing back with them. How do you cope with that anxiety?
So it depends on how willing the partner who's coming home from work is to help soothe your fears. So I know a lot of people are just kind of walking in the door and dumping their clothes on the ground and sticking them in the microwave, no metal, or leaving them in an untouchable area and just kind of jumping in the bath. Coronavirus is a fat-based virus, so soap and water is one of the best things to do to remove it. So if they want to just rinse off and get all nice and clean, that should really do it. As far as breathing on you and actually contracting it through bodily fluids, understanding that you want to keep your distance right now while this is going on in order for you to feel safe. So for me, it's about real intimacy. It's about creating emotional safety for the person who's out there having to be in it, as well as them creating emotional safety for you who's worried about bringing it home, and really being considerate of each other as much as you can.
Yeah, I love that. Have that conversation, right? Ask them what precautions they're taking, because again, we're impacting each other. And I think that's what we're really looking at, right? The spreading of this is because of a lot of contact. Laura Rhodes Levin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me anytime.
Have a beautiful night.
You too.
So again, right now we're talking a lot about anxiety, and there's a lot of ways we can minimize that anxiety. And we're coming in contact with other individuals. So I really advise that we have a conversation with those that we live with about precautions and hand washing. And like what we just discussed, I think it's important that we also build a home that feels safe to us. I personally started buying a lot of plants. I was never a plant person, but making my home more of a sanctuary definitely drops my anxiety. It definitely makes me feel very soothed. And now more than ever, we really have to focus on that. If you want to join the conversation, you can do so by tweeting at hashtag I'm listening. I have a tweet, and this one asks, my wife's been drinking a lot lately, and I'm sober, so it triggers me and it makes me fear relapsing. How do I handle this? So this is something that's coming up a lot, whether it's around food that's being brought into the home or alcohol or even for some drugs. Everyone has different ways that they self-soothe. But remember, we're constantly impacting those around us. And so be very thoughtful about how what you might be bringing in or the ways you might be choosing to self-soothe, how they might be impacting those around you. If you yourself are the one that's in recovery and you're feeling triggered or unsafe, have a conversation, because I don't think it's unreasonable if your recovery is on the line to ask an individual to please refrain from drinking, bringing alcohol home, or at least drinking alcohol around you. Either way, though, please stay in contact with your sober support network. There are meetings available online, but it's okay to have an honest conversation about the difficulty you're having and setting boundaries around that. And to those that are bringing in the food and the triggers and the drugs and the alcohol, again, be very thoughtful, because the way that you might self-soothe might actually create something really dangerous and toxic for the people that you're living with. So, again, let's be extra, extra compassionate and full of care and thoughtful now more than ever. This isn't forever, but right now, while we don't have a lot of access to our, resources and our mental health supports, and we can't leave the home, we want to really be thoughtful about those things. We have another tweet question. This one asks, a friend is having people over for dinner next weekend, and I don't want to go, but he is pressuring me and saying I'm being sensitive. This one is a no-go. We have to stop having these gatherings. You know, we were giving out different numbers that we felt made it safer. It was 50, then we knocked it down, I think 15, 10 or 5. Listen, it's about contact. It's about being around other individuals and spreading and passing things. So you're definitely not being too sensitive. Not only do I want you to say no, I also want you to take a moment to lovingly educate your friend around the risk that he's putting others at by inviting people over for dinner. And I want to support those that are setting boundaries, letting them know that you have my support and saying absolutely not. And please be more thoughtful about things like that. Coming up on our next show, we're going to be having Frankie Grande joining us. And we're also going to be talking about anxiety and homeschooling when you have individuals at home, especially those kids. And I want to thank Dr. Jen Wider and Laura Rhodes-Levin for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. And again, if you want to have your question answered, you can do so by tweeting at #I'mListening. As always, thank you all for joining us. Have an awesome, awesome night.